Today is June 24th, 2022. We're gonna do another Zoom session right now. So today, I think we're gonna be looking at some pictures today, right? I was hoping that, I know you have some photos and I was just curious. It's always fun to look at photos and actually, I wanna hear context for these, some of the photos that you have.
Well, how do we do this?
Probably if you could just turn the photo towards the camera and kind of stick it up towards the camera, at least for a few, each one for a few seconds or a little bit longer. And then I want to hear about the photos. I mean, I guess ideally we would have, I would do editing and have them show up automatically, but the reality is that's not going to happen. So.
Okay, there are not any particular order.
Okay.
The first one I have.
You're gonna have to put it much closer. Yeah, there we go. Just about like right there. Okay, so who do we have here? Who are in these? Who's?
Okay, here we have my mother's sister, Sally, and her husband.
Your mother's sister, Sally. And remind me, is Sally younger or?
Younger. Yeah, she's maybe was 4 years younger. I'm not sure. Let's see if I get the story of this straight. When their parents, my grandparents, as I reiterated before, died of consumption or tuberculosis in Denver. Pepe, her mother, I think died in 1911. I'm not sure. Their father, Charles, in either 1914 or 1915. Let's see. Sally was placed by a Jewish organization in Denver. I can't recall the name of it, with a family in upstate New York. And my mother kept in contact. They both kept in contact with each other because there was a time when Sally got married. This was after World War II had ended. Her husband was in the Army. He came back. They lived in New York, and for whatever reason, they decided to come to Southern California to live. They decided to drive by car. So sometime, I believe it was in 1952, early in the 1950s, but I believe it was 1952, they start driving cross country in their car, and it's somewhere in mid-continent, possibly in Kansas. They were involved. They had a young daughter too. Her name was Karen. They were involved in an accident. There's Karen and a son, Bobby is the name that comes to me. The four of them were involved in an accident. Sally and her husband died in the accident. Bobby sustained a lower body injury, I believe, to the legs. And Karen, serious head injuries that were probably to affect her for the rest of her life. My mother went, when we found out about it, she went to Kansas, and both children are in the hospital. My memory is vague about him. The boy was placed in an orphanage and recovered from his injuries. There was casual contact with him as he grew up after that, but my memory is very vague on what happened to him. I have no idea right now. Karen eventually recovered enough from her injuries to be self-sufficient, and my memories of what happened to her are vague. I have no idea now where either one of them is or whether they're even still alive. And that's about the end of this. Okay, let's go.
That's a tragic story.
That's a tragic story, yes, very.
I thought it was going to get, well, I was like, when you said they were going to come out to Southern California, I thought it was going to be an interesting, like, you know, who are these people? And
I wish I could. I wish it would have been better than that, but okay. The next one I have here is this is a gravestone in a cemetery in Denver. I don't recall the name of the cemetery. Then the name on it is Pepe Grossman, born, let's see, 1881. Died August 6, 1914. And this is her tombstone. Lucille and I found this in Denver in a Jewish cemetery there. That's about all I can tell you about this.
Were you able to find any other relatives, or was that the only one you were able to find? Obviously, you were on a scavenger hunt to.
Well, I'm not sure. Let's just see.
Okay.
What we find here. I got more pictures here than okay. Here's an interesting one.
Okay, I'm seeing a ship.
It's a ship, yeah. It's a
USS LST
208.
I was gonna say 208 looks like on the front of it. So that's your ship.
Yes, it's anchored in the Wangpu River in Shanghai, China.
Hold on. I got questions.
Let me finish.
Okay.
The bottom says USS LST-28 at Shanghai, China. 24th of December, 1945. 24th of, that's Christmas Eve. That's Christmas Eve. We were anchored in that one spot when we got back from Kagoshima, Japan, after taking our last load of Japanese soldiers from the Chinese mainland back to Japan. That was in late November. Let's just call it November 20th. On the way back from Kagoshima, and incidentally, we never traveled alone. LSTs were very much like, let's just say, in the Navy, destroyers. During the war, the Navy had hundreds of destroyers, and they were like airplanes. They were part of a group and squadron. So these destroyers, they traveled with their groups and squadrons wherever they went, unless they were on special missions or something like that. Well, it was the same with LSTs. There was about 1,050 LSTs built during the war. At the end of the war, the majority, and after the war ended in Europe, the majority of the LSTs were in the Pacific, preparing for operation. There was a name of it that I can't call, but it was for the invasion of Japan. And prior to the armistice, we were in the last big invasion we had, a large Japanese island, and I can't think of the name of it now. That was probably the most tragic invasion we had ever participated in, because about roughly 120,000 Japanese troops died, and maybe 12 to 14,000 American troops died in that invasion. What is the name of it? We actually still have a naval base there to this day. Okay.
It's not, is it Guam or is it?
Not Guam. Guam is,
yeah,
is in the Western Pacific. Guam, Tinian, and Saipan are a group of islands together there. I was also there, but
I'd have to look it up. But
it was the last invasion we had during the war, and to create a base to operate.
Are you talking about Okinawa?
What?
Are you talking about Okinawa?
Okinawa, yeah. Okay.
So I have two follow-up questions. So you're saying that there was about 1,000 of those LSTs. So was the one you were on the 208?
There was over 1,000 built, and after the war ended in Europe, most of them ended up in the Western Pacific, in the area of between Guam and Okinawa,
So you were on the 208th LST, I'm guessing.
on LST number 208.
And then the photo that you have did you take that or did someone else take that?
No, somebody else took that. I bought it for maybe a quarter or a half a buck or something like that. I don't know who. I probably wrote what's at the bottom there.
I'm guessing there wasn't a lot of portable cameras at that time, obviously.
What?
There probably wasn't a lot of portable cameras at that time for you to take a photo.
No, I didn't have a camera.
Yeah,
I didn't
exactly.
have a camera. If you'll look very close, especially on the left-hand side of the ship, you'll see a lot of small boats. You see a lot of small boats anchored there. See them?
On the
On the ship, towards the
ship.
stern. Towards the
yeah.
stern. Yeah, small boats. We call these people gooks, Gooks. A terrible name to infer on anybody, but at that time that's the way it was. And they wanted to sell us anything. Most of the stuff was, as an example, they were selling liquid. Sailors being what they were, some of them were also concerning what some of them went through, were heavy drinkers. And among other things, they sold a lot of liquor, apparently, which they made up themselves, because I remember seeing a bottle that one of my shipmates had bought called Genuine Imitation, some type of a Scotch whiskey. I can't think of the name they put on it now, but it was a prominent name at the time and still might be. Genuine Imitation Scotch whiskey, guaranteed to be many years old. That's what we saw. Also, all kinds of counterfeit clothes, counterfeit names of stylish things that was available at the time. Anyway, coming back from Kagoshima, we had roughly 12 to 14 LSTs. We would travel in formation, depending on how many ships were there. They could be 3 or 4 ships wide and 4 or 5 ships that would trail. And we would travel in formation. I would have when we were at sea traveling, the ship's company was broken up into 3 watches of 4 hours each. Let's see, and I had, when I was on watch, it would rotate to 4 hours, from 8 to 12 in the morning, 12 to 4 in the afternoon, and 4 to 8 in the evening. And then for nighttime, it would be repeated again. So we had, in effect, 4 hours on and 8 hours off while we were traveling at sea. When we were in port, either moored to buoys or at a dock, we had a 2-watch system where we were on for 8 hours and off for 16.
When you were on the
Okay,
watch, so when
yeah.
you were on, when you're
So-
saying you're on watch, you were like actually watching stuff, or is it just you
Okay,
were?
okay. When we were tied up to either a buoy or a dock, we had port and starboard watch. One day we were on duty, and the next day we were off duty. The And let's see, the head of the ship was called the officer of the deck, and he would duty was at the gangway. And it was also his duty to keep a log of everybody who left the ship or boarded the ship. That was his duty. He kept track. The officer of the deck kept track of everything that was going on in the ship that day. And he had runners or we didn't have a telephone per se like we perceive it today, but we had a system where we wore headphones and had a microphone that we could anybody that was on watch over the ship. He was at port. He was in contact with the officer of the deck, and at sea, he was in contact with either the executive officer or anybody that was appointed by the executive officer to be running the ship. In other words, there's always somebody running the ship, not necessarily the captain, because when we were in port, the captain was probably gone most of the time, and the exec ran the ship.
So what would you have to watch for? Are you just
What?
watching? What were you watching for? If you were on watch on shore, what do you?
Well,
is it pretty boring? I mean,
okay.
it sounds. Is it pretty boring? Were you watching for,
Okay. When we were in an American port or an allied port, it's still a military
Yeah, I know.
vessel, and the people out there they're not all good people. Anyway, that's the way the Navy ran. That's when you were a land, an army base or something like that, the base was surrounded by a fence, and the entrances were all manned by military police, and they examined everybody that came that wanted to enter the base or anything like that. So that's the way the military was. Okay, so where was I now? Oh yeah, we had left Kagoshima, and we were in formation, and we were headed back to Shanghai, and I think we were in the West or the East China Sea, and we were in the area between the northern point of the Philippines and the southern point of Japan, would have been Kagoshima. And we ran into a typhoon. Now, have you ever seen pictures at sea in which they have these heavy seas, these big waves in which the bow would blast into the wave, and then the bow would come up, and
Yeah.
you can literally see the underside of the ship at the bow come out of the water, and then that's what we had. And we endured about 30 hours of that kind of sea. We had to careful to watch our main engines and our auxiliary engines, that because the way the ship was tossing around there, that we didn't get air mixed into the fuel we were burning, because if we got air in it, we would lose power. Now, our fuel, okay, the bottom of the hull was comparted into many tanks. I don't know how many there were, but the ship was 326 feet long and had a beam of 50 feet. And the floor of the tank deck inside the ship was the ceiling of all of these tanks. And some of these tanks were used for storing fuel for the diesel engines, and some of them were used as to fill with ballast to keep the ship on a level beam, both a beam and or broadside, and from bow to stern. We had bubble floats in the engine room. We had bubble floats in the engine room, which if the bubble was centered, we knew the ship was not down by the bow or the stern or the port or the starboard side. The ship was perfectly level. And when we were in port and weren't subject to wave action, when we arrived in port, we'd look at the bubble, and we'd have to pump fuel, or not fuel, have to pump water from one tank to another one's to level the ship. Well, anyway, another thing during, while we were at sea, the main engines that were attached to the screws at the end of the ship by what's called a propeller shaft. And the propeller shaft at the stern of the ship went through a packing to keep out seawater. There was something that was packed around the shaft, and we would pump grease into the seals there to keep out the sea. Well, when you were running at sea, these shafts were running on a daily basis. Somebody had to go down in the propeller shaft, stern of the ship, we had big cans of grease. We would put on gloves, and the can of grease we would put in a receptacle, and when we closed the lid, there was a little projection at the bottom that would puncture the bottom of the grease, and then with a foot pedal, very much like the brake pedal of a car, we would pump the pedal, and this would pump the grease into the seal at the back of the shaft. When you were at sea and the ship was fairly level, it wasn't much of a problem. But in a storm like we were in, we had to make sure that seawater didn't get in, or because if it did, it would create all kinds of problems. So that's one of the things I had to do when we were in this storm, and it was probably the hairiest time of my life aboard ship was that storm, because not only would it roll left to right, but it also pitch bow up and bow down. I never got seasick, but many of the crew did during that. And because they were not available for duty, because they were sick and not available for duty, those the few of us who were took the brunt of all this time we had to spend. The duty in the engine room was there were 9 of us in the engine force. We had it, not including the chief, because the chief never stood watch. Well, maybe sometimes he did if there was a shortage, but generally the chiefs didn't. There was first class machinist mate, motor machinist mate. There were the 2 second class motor machinist mate, of which I was one of. We had 3 firemen second, and we had 3 apprenticed firemen. That was the 9 men who comprised of the engine room force. We were also responsible for we had 2 LCVPs and davits on both sides of the ship. I'm not sure you could see them in the, okay. They were in davits on the side of the ship, so we had to take care of the engines in those, and that meant like changing oil and doing whatever maintenance was necessary. There were also a lot of electric motors on this ship. We also required maintenance, bearings lubricated, and things like that. We had electricians who were a separate division, but a separate group, but under the engineering division of the ship. They took care of the electric motors on the ship. Let's see. Now, during the watches, we would have at sea, during the watch at sea, there were 2 men in the main engine room, and there was 1 man in the auxiliary engine room. In the main engine room, we had the propulsion was provided by 2 General Motors 567-12 engines. The 12-12 meant there were 12 cylinders, and each cylinder had a displacement of 567 cubic inches, and they each developed 900 horsepower and gave us a flank speed of somewhere between 9 and 10 knots. At sea, there was 2 men on watch at sea. They would alternate at the throttle. We had a throttle for each engine. When the throttle lever stood straight up, that means we were at still. When you wanted to go, we had a port and starboard throttle. You would move them both up, and we had what was called an annunciator. And an annunciator was a round thing that was connected by cables with a like unit up in the wheelhouse. And when the captain ordered, when we were still, of course, they were at stop. And as you looked at the annunciator, from 12 o'clock to going clockwise, 12 to 6 o'clock, it was divided into a number of sections that looked like a a pie, roughly maybe 10, 20 degrees, something like that. Function stop, 1/3, 2/3, full speed, and flank speed. And we had a chart on the bulkhead in front of them in which 1/3 would indicate the engines had to go so many RPMs, etc. From 1/3 to 2/3 to full to flank. It had a corresponding RPM from the engines. Okay, so when you had the throttle watch, you had to throttle those things forward. Now, when we were seeing formation, and I mentioned it, we would be maybe, depending on how many ships we had, we could be 4 ships abreast, and then maybe there might be 10 ship lengths between the first row and the second row, and so on, just depending on how many there were. And we would generally steam at either generally at full speed, which was 1 knot below flank speed. Now you have to understand that also some of the ships we were in, the fastest ships had to correspond to the speed we could produce, because we also had escorts ahead of us, behind us, and on both sides. So everybody had to move at the same speed of the slowest ships. We were the slowest. And if we were at full speed, the watch on the port and starboard sides had to watch how we were flanked on either side of the ship. And if it was determined that we had moved slightly ahead in formation, they would tell the officer of the deck, and the officer of the deck would tell the talker, we're a little bit too fast to take off 2 turns. Well, now, if standard speed, let's just say, was 150 turns per minute on the propeller shaft, they would say, take off 2. And what we would have to do on the throttle, we would look at the RPM indicator, and if we were, say, at 150 revolutions per minute, we would gently touch the throttles back until we were at 148 turns per minute. Then they would wait for a while to see how this was working out. So it was a constant, while we were it was constant movement on the throttles back and forth, so that our formations would stay lined up and everybody was moving at the proper speed. Now, when you were at watch in the auxiliary engine room, there was only 1 man on there. And in the auxiliary engine room, we had 3 Buddha diesel engines, 100 horsepower diesel engines, and they turned a 100 kilowatt generator. When we were docked, or when we were moored or tied to a buoy, all the energy we needed to keep the ship running was one of those 100 kilowatt generators. They provided mostly light, ventilation, and radio communication services when we were tied up or docked. At sea, we had 2 generators running of the 3 we had. So we had 200 kilowatts of electricity available. Now, when we were at sea, we would alternate the three generators so as not to put too much time on one generator and not enough on another one. In other words, keep the work as even among the three as possible. The chief and the engineering officer would work out the schedule to bring one generator online and take another one off. So when we were moored, we only needed one generator, and during the day we would alternate between the three generators. And the way we would do that is the generator that was online, we at the back of the auxiliary engine room, we had a big electrical panel, like you would see at any electrical installation ashore. And we had each generator had its own board with a rheostat to, in other words, you can adjust the amount of energy that either one of the generators could put out, was, I believe, by adjusting the field current. I'm not sure if you had the field current turned up all the way, then the generator would be putting out its 100 kilowatts. When you turn the field generator down, then it would be less. So when we looked at the dials, we could see how much energy the ship, if we had one generator online, we could see how many amps and kilowatt hours we were generating. When we wanted to switch to one generator to the next, we would look at the log to see which one to take offline and which one to put online. And let's just say we were tied up at and not underway, and we were drawn 88 amps on the one generator. Then we had rheostats for each generator. So the generator that we were going to put online, we would start, and when it was warmed up, we could start running the rheostat up. In other words, transfer the load from one generator to the other. We would go up maybe 5 or 6 amps on the one we were going to put online, and the one going offline, we would turn down 5 or 6 amps. So in effect, we were transferring the load from one generator to the end, to the other one. When all the load had been transferred, then we could turn off the generator. And we did this hourly, I believe, as I remembered.
Interesting to hear some of these jobs, or to get into some of the details of what you would do aboard the ship.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in the auxiliary engine room, also, we had another chore to keep up with. Now, we used diesel fuel, which we would periodically pull up to a small tanker ship, it's called a harbor tanker, and we would load diesel fuel. Sometimes I'm not sure what our capacity or diesel was, but it was in the many thousands of miles we could travel. But anyway, the diesel fuel we had got was not clean. It was pretty dirty. So what we had to do is run the diesel fuel through a purifier. And then from the purifier, the diesel fuel that was purified would go into, I remember I told you we had tanks on the bottom of the ship, and we would put it from a raw fuel tank into a purified dill tank, and that provided diesel fuel for the diesel engines, the main propulsion engines, and the auxiliary engines. And while we were underway, and the pure fuel purifier was a centrifugal one, in which a rotating chamber would rotate at high speed. I'm not sure what it was, and it used centrifugal force. And the contaminants in the fuel weighed more, was heavier than the diesel fuel itself. So when you spun them, the heaviest objects went out to the end of the centrifugal purifier, and the purified fuel would stay near the center. That's basically how it worked. And we were always at sea. We were always running the purifier so that the day tanks would have enough fuel for the main engines and the auxiliary engines. After we had filled up the day tanks, we had one on each side of the auxiliary engine room, and they had a lot of capacity. I don't remember what the day tanks, how much capacity they had. But after the fuel was purified, then we had to take the centrifugal purifiers apart and clean all the schmutz out of them. So that in the auxiliary engine room kept us busy with that when we were underway and the main engines were running.
Well, we're moving, we've spent a bit of time on this subtopic. Should we move on to some more photos?
Yeah.
What do you think? I had a feeling you'd be able to talk about the different photos for a while. Though natural that you'd be able to talk about the
Okay.
LST 208 for a while.
I'm just going to pick up random.
That works for me.
Here. Okay. Okay, can you see this one?
Yes, but you gotta hold it steady. There's two ladies, one's kneeling.
Two ladies, right. Okay.
Who do you have there?
I'm not sure which is which, but I think the one kneeling is my Aunt Cele.
I'm gonna eat them all. Does that mean we won? Looks like a win to me.
Hold it, just. Okay, the one that's kneeling, I believe, is Cele. She was my father's youngest sister. The one behind her, I believe, is my mother, Irene. Again.
What was her name? Steve?
Irene.
Oh, the TV turned on again.
Oh, I thought I turned it off and I did it. On the back of the pictures, two names. That is not my handwriting. It says Cele and Irene. You see it?
Yeah, Cele. Okay, show me the front of the picture again.
Huh?
Show me the front of the picture. We had to edit, or we're. So you think who's the person you think is kneeling?
Okay, one of them is, I believe the one kneeling is Cele. And the other person is my mother, Irene.
And Cele was the younger sister of your father.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I can't tell. Do you have an idea of how old they were in those photos? Are they just like teenagers right there?
It's probably in their late teens, 15, 16, 17 years old. Okay, now. That is me and my sister, Shirley.
Nice looking kids.
Yeah. Now I'm probably 3 or 4 years old, and Shirley is 5 or 6 years old in this picture. This was probably taken in Denver before we moved to Chicago.
So that type of photo, would you have gone to a professional photographer? Like cameras at that time?
This
They
was
weren't.
done by a professional photographer, yes.
Because I assume that most people didn't have personal cameras back then.
That's right.
That's very cool. So what do you have? You have like sneakers on, or
Well, let's see.
almost
Shorts.
you have
Yeah,
shorts?
short pants on.
What kind of shoes are those?
They're called tennis shoes.
Yeah, I was gonna say they look just like. I mean, so you back in the day, you guys still had tennis shoes, huh?
Yeah.
Tennis shoes have been around forever. At least,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Okay. Okay. This is a picture of myself and Esther. Can you see it?
Yeah. I was just checking you guys out.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the back. It says year unknown. I would say in the 60s.
That's as good a guess as I would have.
Yeah. Okay, down.
Okay, you're gonna have to hold this photo for a few moments because I want the camera to see it. Okay, there's a bunch of, this is an old one.
Okay.
There's 6 people, 2 people in the front. Okay, now you can try to turn it around and try to tell us who these people are.
Left to right on the bottom. Left to right, that's Bertha and Leopold.
Okay.
That's my grandparents, your great-grandparents. Then on top, left to right, is okay. Left to right is Molly, Cele, my father, and Dewey. That's the parents and the 4 children. my grandparents.
Wait, so say that again. So on the left is Cele.
No, on
Chris.
the left is Molly. Cele is the
Third.
third one from the left.
So I messed it up. So
Okay,
it's Molly, then
Okay, now this is interesting because look at my father is dressed in a naval uniform, and he entered the Navy in the, I believe, the summer of 1917. 1917. That maybe 4 or 5 months. We went to the war and entered the war in the spring of 1917. He's in the uniform. Now, I'm trying to figure out how he got there. He apparently contacted the Spanish flu as a recruit in training at the San Diego Naval Training Station because he was in the Balboa Naval Hospital. So I'm seeing him there in naval uniform. The only way, while he was in boot training for the 8 to 12 weeks, he was in boot training. He never had a leave. In boot training, you usually got the weekend off unless you had the watch. You usually had the weekend off. But here he is in Denver in uniform. So I have to think that he was on leave after he finished his boot training. And that he got sick after he returned from this leave and went to the hospital. Because if he would have gotten sick while in training, he never would have ended up here. That's only logic.
and he would not have been wearing the uniform if he took the photo after he was discharged.
Yeah, he's in uniform. That means he's on leave.
Yeah.
And he would have never gotten leave during boot training. So he had finished his recruit training, was on leave, and when the leave was over, he went back to San Diego because he ended up in the Naval Hospital. This is logical.
Mhm.
And he got sick before he was sent out to the fleet. Okay.
Okay, so who do we, let's see. We have a house. If you move it up just a tiny bit, can you just raise it?
That's
just
the house where I was born.
Can you move it up just a tiny bit? I want to see the people. You're cutting off the people right now. The camera, adjust the camera down. You adjusted it higher. There we go. Okay, so I see, it looks like possibly there's 6 people in it, 3 high,
Okay.
3 low.
Okay. Okay. In the front row, we have 3 people. Stanley, Dick, and Elizabeth or Betty. In the back row, we have Molly, that's their mother, Leopold, And well, maybe we have Cele, Leopold, and Molly. I don't see Bertha there. Bertha had gray hair. So in the background, in the center is Leopold, and the other two are probably Molly and Cele. Okay. You can see him.
Okay, and then so once again, just to give a reminder of the who everyone is. So
Okay.
Molly,
Okay.
Stanley and
Molly is my father's oldest sister,
okay,
and Cele is his youngest sister.
and then Stanley and
Dick and Elizabeth are the daughter of Molly.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get.
Yeah.
Try to get clear.
Yeah. Okay. The next one. The house in the previous picture was at 1457 Corona Street. It's the house I was born. Later on, we can talk about that some more. I have another picture. Okay. This is in 2002 or 2003 when Lucille and I were in Denver. And I got some information from my cousin Charles, who is my mother's oldest brother, Ed. Charles was his son. And the two houses here have just undergone renovation, a heavy renovation. And in one of the two houses is where the Grossmans lived in the early 1900s. Okay, I have something blocking my screen here. Let me get rid of it. Okay, I got it. Oh, so I took this picture from our car. I'm not sure which one it was, but it's the address that my cousin gave me, and this is what I saw. Okay. I'm looking at the back of the there's not much information on the back of the picture, but the front tells me all I need to know. This probably was taken in Chicago aboard a pony. Shirley and myself. Obviously, she's 7 or 8 years old. I'm 5 or 6. So this had to be in Chicago.
Very nice.
Okay. This was at a time now when cameras became available to everybody. That's myself and my father. Now, I see a river of some kind behind them. So I have to think I'm probably 5 years old. It's my dad. He has a mustache. Okay.
That's what I was noticing about it
Yeah,
too. I was gonna, the mustache looked cool.
That's probably the Chicago River behind them. I'm probably 5 years old there. Okay. Okay, the back of this one says Bob Richards, Denver, 1928. Okay, I'm probably 5 or 6 years old there. It says 1928, but I believe.
Pull back just a little bit. There's some glare.
Yeah. Okay. But I believe it's more like 1929 or 1930. This probably was taken when we returned to Denver from Chicago in 1930, I believe. 1930, because we came out to Los Angeles in December of 1930. And obviously, I was much younger than this when we left Denver for Chicago. Okay. Okay. Can you see that one?
Yeah, I can see that one actually really well. Who do we have in this photo?
Okay, that's a family picture. My mother and father, Shirley, and myself. And this was probably taken down in the beach area, probably Venice, California, on the what they called a boardwalk. It was actually a concrete walk that paralleled the shoreline in Venice, California. One of the Harmelins probably took it. This is an early family picture of us, 1932, 1933, something like that.
I like that one.
Huh?
I like that photo.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, my mother and father, probably 1940, 1941, I'm guessing.
It's a good photo.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, this is a somewhat priceless picture to me. see it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on the right side. My cousin Dick in the middle, and my cousin Stanley on the far side. This is the only picture that exists of the three of us in the service. Okay, that was probably in 1944 sometime. Dick was Stanley and myself enlisted together in the Navy. Dick was a 4F-er because they kind of like determined a heart murmur when he went through a physical, and he was a 4F. Towards the end of the war, probably in late 1944, I would guess, because Dick didn't go in the service until early or maybe sometime during the 1944. Now, before Dick went in the service, he worked at the El Segundo division of the Douglas Aircraft Company, and he was involved in timekeeping. In other words, what his department did was they collected all the time cards at the time card station, and they logged out everybody being timed in, being clocked in or clocked out, or anything. That's the work he did. And while he was working there, one time I was home on leave from San Diego. He finagled a ride for me in an airplane that the El Segundo division of the Douglas Aircraft Company was building for the Navy. And that was a dive bomber. These are the dive bombers that literally sunk the 4 Japanese aircraft carriers in the Battle of the Midway, 4 of them. And he finagled a ride for me. And so I drove there. He gave me some papers that admitted me to the planet. And then I had an escort to take me out to where the plane was. And the plane that I flew in was an SBD Dauntless dive bomber that had just been finished by the El Segundo division of the Douglas Aircraft Company and was in test flight mode. And anyway, they got me the proper attire to wear while we were flying. I got in the back cockpit of the airplane. I was instructed how to remove if there was an emergency. I had a parachute on. They plugged me into various ports. I had a headphone and a microphone on. They gave me a helmet, and I was instructed how to open the canopy and get out of the airplane if there was an emergency. My throat kind of tightened up when they were telling me all of this. And then when they were done, the pilot came in there and he introduced myself, offered his hand in a handshake, and he reiterated some of the things that the ground crew had told me and all that. Anyway, he started the engine, closed the canopies, and he taxied out and we took off. And I was told the flight, this was the final flight for this airplane before acceptance by the Navy, that we would be float anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, just depending on what the traffic was, etc. All of this was at what was then called Mines Field, which is the same location as LAX today, except the entrances, instead of being on whatever the street is, it was on further one south. Okay, where the Douglas plant was, it's now gone. We were in the air maybe 15 minutes, and I'm listening now to the talk between the pilot and the tower. And at the time, I didn't understand what was going on. He's talking something about the propeller, et cetera, not responding to, it was a constant speed propeller. And sometime I'll tell you what a constant speed propeller is in aircraft. Anyway, we found myself, we returned to the airport and landed. When we pulled up to the tarmac, the ground crew came in and they disconnected me from the airplane, and we got down on the ground there, and the ground crew took me up to the front of the airplane, and I'm looking at the prop. The hub of the prop was full of oil. The oil was leaking out of the prop. And what the oil does, oil pressure, adjusts the pitch of the airplane propeller. So you have a low pitch for takeoff so that you could get full RPM out of the engine. If you tried to take off in high pitch, the engine wouldn't have enough power to move that much air. Apparently the used engine oil pressure to change the pitch of the propeller, and we couldn't operate the plane properly, couldn't go into constant speed. And as an example, what constant speed means is they would set the propeller RPM, say 2,400 revolutions per minute. And if you wanted to increase speed, you would decrease the pitch so that the speed could be maintained, and the speed would vary, but the RPM would stay constant depending on the pitch of the propellers. That's the best way I can explain it. When you had a high pitch, you would be at high speed, and if you had a low pitch, you would be at low speed. Okay, it's complicated.
It's still interesting. That's cool that you got to go up in that plane. Got a question for you. Do you have a lot of photos left?
I have I have a bunch.
Should we leave it there and pick it up again next week? I'm actually enjoying this, but
yeah, it's 20 after. I'm a little tired. Yeah, it's I'm looking at all these.
I'd love to, if you can, yeah, I'd love to look at more of these.
Yeah.
Just sort them, and we'll
do more of these next week. Okay.
That sounds perfect. Well,
all
I
right,
appreciate the stories, and I appreciate the photos. Very
all
cool.
right. And when are you coming down this weekend?
I'll see you in just on Wednesday.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to that.
I am too.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye, Grandpa.